right, I think we're live. We're going to be starting the podcast officially in a moment here. I will be, doing some not exciting checking of making sure the notes are ready, making sure the audio levels for the podcast feed recording are working. Hey, Kate, can you check your mic again?
Sure. Checking again. Looks like it's registering fine.
Awesome. All right.
Great.
Okay. And now let's do the other thing where we should make sure that any windows we have open for the video are not also streaming the video.
So I don't want that streaming.
Nope. So yeah, stop that one. Cool. Okay. That is good. So that one was the only one on YouTube. The event page didn't instantly start streaming. And this...
Great.
So this... yeah, they just... right, we're just seeing the thumbnail that YouTube picked. And they always pick it when you're going, or something. And it's fun.
It's very fun. That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's probably driven by an algorithm.
So you guys don't set those? Because I've often thought that you just
can
do that to me sometimes. Because the episodes I've been on, I'm like...
You look concerned.
Those are the stills that show up.
Mm-hmm. No, it was that was cool. I did take one still from one of the videos we had, but because I thought it was cute. Anyway. Okay, so here, we are set. We're set. We're gonna go for it.
All right, let's do this.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lean Into Art cast. I'm Rob Stenzinger, and I'm joined here with special guest today, Kate Shields Stenzinger. Hey, Kate.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me on the podcast again.
Welcome. And so we're here today to do the normal thing we do on the Lean Into Art cast, which is to explore some sort of creative topic in a way that hopefully helps us have some kind of interesting takeaways. But first, we sort of look at it from the high level and think about it in general and then jump into some details, right? And hopefully have something handy to take away, maybe some tips, maybe tricks, I don't know. But before we do all that on this show, we typically start out with the curveball. But before we do that, I wanted to take a second and say thanks for coming back to the show. And Kate's been on a few episodes lately. You're not... I think you're starting to... I think 4 episodes is like a tie for either second most appearances or most appearances. So
nice. Well, we'll have to pull that data.
Yeah.
So I want to know
who has that. Yeah.
Who holds the record.
Yeah. And there's so obviously so we're married, but that's not the only reason you're on the show.
Nepotism at its finest.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you're comic storyteller. You've made some comics at babieslovecomics.com, blogger, and creative force in general. Let's see. What's something that I don't know? How would you describe what you do?
I think you sum it up pretty well. I mean, you know me better than most, and I consider myself somebody who is constantly embarking on different creative activities and different creative projects. And I think you've described me in the past as somebody who's, picking up a different hobby all the time. And I think it's really true. And I think it's, I love to create, but I haven't found that thing that really has kind of, I think, held me or held my attention for a long period of time. And I think part of that is due to just our life, right? So we've got 2 young children, and that is my job, right? That's my job outside of my job right now. And so a lot of my creativity is driven around finger painting and different projects that the kids can do. And so, I kind of, the things that I love to do, I don't always have the time or it just doesn't kind of fit into the lifestyle now. I did pottery for years, and that got harder and harder as the kids were around, to have all those chemicals in the house, and to have, right, yeah, and to have, a kiln running, just kind of didn't work with my lifestyle.
Yep, 1,000 degrees appliance.
Right.
Not so safe. Let's see. What else? One thing, too, that I think is going to tie into our topic is you're also, your background, you have your master's in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a therapist. And for your day job, you're a leader. And that's, I think our main topic today is we'll be visiting creative project conflict resolution. And I'm guessing you just have a lot of different experiences to draw from.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about collaboration, and with collaboration typically comes conflict, and and it's just kind of part of human nature and the way we're built and the way we operate. And when particularly there's a creative endeavor going on, folks tend to have a lot of passion and a lot of emotion around that, and so that can lead. Can be something additionally that leads to conflict. And so I think as we explore that today, we'll talk a lot about, I'll draw from a lot of my experiences, both in the land of psychology and also, my professional life as well. Being a leader in an organization where, resources are limited. People have different goals. People have different desires of what they want to kind of have come to fruition, and so that does lead to conflict. And how do we deal with that, and how do we manage that? And then also kind of from the creative projects, we've done a couple of creative projects together. We may possibly be able to pull from some of those experiences to also talk about conflict and how conflict works and conflict resolution strategies that are good, bad, and otherwise. What works and what doesn't.
Yeah, we may have a few insights on that. Let's before we jump into all that, let's start out with safety in mind. Let's begin with what we call our warm up question, or curveball, actually. And I think it's awesome when you bring a curveball to the show. Do you have one?
I do, and I have to apologize right away. I'm getting over a cold, and so I have this crazy cough that comes and goes. So I apologize for that. I will try to not cough into the microphone, but you may see me trying to not cough into the microphone.
Right.
So anyway, I do have a curveball. I've had a couple that I've been thinking about as we've been talking about having me on the show and talking about collaboration and conflict. And so my curveball, as we think about collaboration, in our house and with our family, we spend a lot of time talking about the importance of learning from mistakes. And it's hard when you have young children to help them to be okay with making mistakes and to understand that some of our best learning comes from mistakes. And so kind of in the spirit of that and in the spirit of kind of walking the walk and talking the talk, my curveball question for you tonight is, when you think through different creative projects that you have engaged in where there has been conflict or where things haven't worked out the way you've wanted, so where there's been a mistake or there's been a problem or there's been a conflict, what would you say would be the one or two kind of key learnings that you have had having gone through those experiences and not done them right? Like, I don't want a story about, well, there was this conflict and here's how I managed it and it was, this fantastic, great thing that I did. I want to know where's something where you're like, yeah, I screwed this up, or I didn't handle this great, and here's what I learned from it. Because I think that's a harder question.
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm hearing you right, this is looking back at creative collaborations, and when things at their end really didn't work out in the way that I'd hoped. Right.
It didn't have to be in the end. It could have been, something started out wrong, or in the middle there was a conflict or a problem.
Okay.
It isn't about did you end up with this great thing in the end. It's about going through the process. Where was Basically, tell me about a mistake where you really learned something.
Well, okay. There's one that, in general, I will not name names. Other than it's not you.
Oh, okay. I was going to say it can be one with me. That's okay.
Nothing like that came to mind immediately.
Okay.
Maybe there's something there, because I do make lots of mistakes, and the one that sticks out is I have a habit and or interest because of I don't know, a variety of things. I mean, probably interest, passion, psychology, having a day job and a night gig typically, right? Night gig typically has been, sometimes it's consulting, sometimes it's things like having a webcomic, sometimes it's a podcast, and sometimes it's been like video game projects. And there's one project in general, or in specific, one project in particular that I really think I should have pushed through my discomfort to have hard conversations. And somehow, when we would seemed to be on different pages, I actually would not necessarily face that head on. Where let's say the person I was working with was working really hard on some aspect of the project that I didn't think really made sense for what our current goal was.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I love seeing them work and be happy in doing what they're doing, but is this really getting us to where we intended to go? And then I was just I didn't address those things directly enough, and that probably comes from a lot of different things with me wanting to avoid conflict with a friend, and also wanting to. It's almost like the outcome of the project was one reason I was doing it, but the other reason was to make a thing with a friend.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to kind of ask you as you were talking through some of that is, who we're working with oftentimes can impact how we manage or how we deal with the conflict. Because exactly to your point, it's, if you're working with a friend, if you're working with a spouse, if you're working with a loved one, how you're going to manage through those conflicts, it is going to be different than if you're, at your day job, and you're all paid to do this certain task. And I think that there's some strategies that we can use kind of across the board, but I can see that being different because it is work with friends. And you're right, so some of the things that you kind of talked about in there is you had multiple goals. You had the goal of finishing the project, but you also had the goal of collaborating with a friend and having that experience and having that shared experience and spending that time together. And it would be interesting kind of looking back to see or to figure out what were your friend or friends' goals on the project. Was, I can think through some of those experiences as I can remember, some folks may have had the goal of learning a new skill. They were comfortable in one area, but they were kind of branching out and trying to, learn a different skill, and just kind of different goals. I'll kind of leave it at that.
And which is exactly that's an excellent point. And the only way to have found that out is to have had better communication.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the heart or the answer of to my curveball that I heard you say is really not handling communication directly, or not handling those kind of conflicts when they were percolating head on.
Yeah, exactly. If because depending on the intent, I enjoyed the hobby aspect of it as well, but I really did want to finish the thing we were working on too.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll say that's interesting. That's an interesting answer because I think anybody that knows you and knows you well finds you to be one of the most direct people out there. And so I think if we were to play back some of those experiences and some of those days, you would probably find that you were or you did bring up some of those conversations and try to kind of direct the group or the individual into a way to accomplish or to complete some of the work. And so it might be worth, as we kind of talk, at a higher level or even go down deeper, to think through some of those scenarios as to what strategies, because I think you and I both have kind of, I think, a broader toolbox now than I think either of us did at that point in time for which to pull from.
That is a good point. And so sometimes in reflection, it's almost like a weird form of time travel, where I think about me now being there then. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, I was me, but I have additional tools and new experiences that
right.
that have helped me navigate that. Well, hence, whatever ends up coming up, that's going to be great. With tangible stuff is cool. I don't mean to. Hopefully, we won't be too hand wavy about projects. Keeping in names of the innocent.
I'll post a list later.
Perfect. All right. I feel like. What do you think? Did I address that curveball? Did I dodge it?
Yes. No, you addressed it. Yep.
Good.
Nope.
You get to make that call. So.
Yes. And I'll push back.
I know. Evidently, Jerzy likes that when you're on and you
don't let go.
Yeah. Hold me accountable. So, all right. Sounds awesome. That's an excellent place to say yay curveball. And now let's go to sort of that part of the show where we just start to explore the topic from a high level, what we call 10,000 feet up. So what we have is this sort of the framing umbrella of this topic is okay. We get together with others to make things from time to time. We're not always making things by ourselves. Hence the collaborating. We want to get something done. We're working with other people, and then what do we do, and how do we work through problems when we get into one another's way, which inherently leads to roadblocks, inefficiency, confusion, frustration, whatever it is. It's some kind of conflict with likely what the stated intent is of trying to get something done. So,
right.
Where would you like to start with this?
Well, I think at a high level, and you have to kind of help me stay at 10,000 feet because I kind of like to dig into details. So help me stay at a higher level. But I think it kind of goes to some of the things that we started to talk about. Conflict typically is going to arise when you've got differing goals, differing opinions, differing perspectives. And so it's that kind of age-old, are we all on the same page? But you can be on the same page. You can have a shared goal, but maybe you're working with somebody who has such a completely different style than you. I've had experiences in my day job, my professional career, where I was working with another individual. We both had the very same goal in mind. We were trying to come up with a process improvement, but we had, and we still have, and we work very hard at kind of working together. We have very different styles. Very, very different styles.
So help me with, so we're describing some things about the conflict in general, but like what does it look like, right? I mean, it's easy to just kind of gloss past that.
Yeah.
So, what are some things that
I can tell you what conflict feels like. I don't know if I can tell you what it looks like.
Okay, cool. Let's try that.
So and that's kind of me coming from my how I approach the world. Conflict feels uncomfortable. I think you even used that term when you were answering the curveball. Conflict feels uncomfortable. Conflict feels unsettling. And you can't always put your finger on the why. Why does working on this make me feel unsettled? And it's, for me anyway, that's when I realize there's a conflict going on. And conflict can be overt, or what's the opposite of overt?
Well, subtle or
Subtle.
beneath the surface?
Yeah, it can be
Yeah.
subtle, or
Okay.
it can be overt, or it can even be masked in a way, even a little beyond just being subtle, right?
man.
Where
It could be classic passive aggressive Minnesotan stuff.
yes, Minnesota nice. It's a
Where,
myth, people.
Oh man, yeah. There's I won't say where this came up, but I received a communication when I asked a question about a project, and the communication I received was didn't address my question, and it just sort of said, "Well, if you don't feel ready, or if you aren't sure about this, maybe don't worry about it. You don't have to be here." Whatever.
Nice.
And it was like, so for me, conflict feels like a hate ball exploding inside of me. Sometimes,
Sure.
not always.
Sure.
Yeah.
How would you describe what it looks like? Because I didn't have an answer to that. I'm curious if you do.
It's almost. It looks like maybe look is a weird thing because it is pretty metaphorical as a way of guessing at how people are feeling and just knowing how I am feeling. So that's probably a way accurate way to tackle it. But one way where I look at it, like if I'm connecting with a group that is needing to collaborate, which is something I've done frequently as a user experience consultant, to interview people and look at different roles and different perspectives, and you can see how some teams they face one another and they look at each other and they listen and they have these behaviors that look like, oh, that group is connected, and then but you can look at if people are crossing their arms or just kind of because I've seen that too. I've seen some pretty
So body language.
yeah, body language is one of them, and especially as a group. Like, I mean, people can have a bad day, so you might notice someone in a group not engaging and connecting as much. But like, if that's the dominant way everyone's interacting, to me, it's sort of you can see it visually.
And that's interesting because I think we work in such different environments because my environment is much more matricized, and so I don't often have the benefit of being in the same room with the folks that I'm collaborating with, right? So we're all on the phone together. So it can be harder to read who's engaged and who's not, and who's feeling conflict and who's not. And so you find yourself trying to read voices and trying to, diffuse conflict that may or may not be there. And so that can be, another skill.
That sounds incredibly hard.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not that different than being in the room and being able to read the room visually.
It's like you're having to play conflict Marco Polo over the phone.
People on the phone, though, have a little bit of social anonymity, not being anonymous. And so people will kind of, at least in my experience, I work with folks that feel more freedom then to speak their mind, right? Because I'm not sitting face to face with you, so I can say, I don't think that I agree with that idea, a little more freely, because of not being face to face. So it isn't. I don't think it's that much more difficult once you kind of once you have some of that experience of working in that environment.
Okay.
But I've wandered off the path, so I apologize.
No, it's interesting. We're talking about conflict. What is it? What does it look like?
What does it feel like?
So it comes up. Other symptoms inherently, I think, are almost like your executive function as a professional, as you're thinking about what are you doing and why are you doing it, and something is in the way, and someone else is saying nothing's in the way, or it's that person who is in the way, or what? Yeah.
Well, I think also
It's like the circumstance around it too.
the circumstance around it, and I think conflict for me in the work that I've done, and even if I think through some of our creative projects, when there's been conflict, there is a mismatch of schedule, or there's a mismatch of expectation. So I can think of projects where things aren't happening, they get off track, off schedule, or the expectation for what each of the person's deliverable is to be is disharmonious.
Okay.
And it's not kind of ticking along like it should.
What dimensions would that disharmony come from? So do they bring the wrong thing, or do they bring an unfinished thing, or what?
Could be all of the above, right?
Not bring a thing,
right? Or bring too much of a thing,
okay.
Right? So you've been part of those projects. I'm sure people that are listening or watching have been a part of those projects where, okay, I have this collaborator and their job is to bring, some artwork to the table, or 3 panels of art, or, they're supposed to write, this
like a story pitch, but
30-second, right? This 30-second, copy, and they show up with 12 pages and thumbnails. And it's expectation mismatch, right? You're smirking.
Nothing. Just having flashbacks.
I can remember, yes, collaborative projects that someone may have worked on where, you get a great idea and you're just running down the path, and that expectation with the client or with the other collaborator kind of maybe isn't there, and that can lead to conflict.
Interesting too. Yeah. There's and so in all cases there's just something's misaligned, and then there's kind of one of the cost of that sort of, like, they expected one thing, you expected another, and now what? It could be not good enough to just notice that, because the conflict, I would guess, would come from someone saying, no, really, this is what you're getting, and then so, like, now things won't change, I suppose, right? It's not just like this is how they are, it's like this is how they're going to be unless we somehow resolve the situation.
Yeah, and it's not, I don't want to paint the picture that it's always just expectation, because style does play into things quite a bit. And it's one of the great, for me, as somebody who studies personality and human nature and psychology and how people work, it's one of the great and exciting and really interesting things is that no matter where you go, you're going to work with all kinds of people, and it's something, even with our kids being as young as they are, I will say, our kids are going to come across all sorts of adults in their lives that are, good, bad, and otherwise, as far as how they support them. And it's training for life. You and I have both worked in jobs where, you work with some difficult people, and you work with some really fun people, and you work with some really smart people, and you work with people who you say, how does this person stay employed? They don't seem to know how to do their job, right? And then I feel like on any given day I could fall into any of those categories. But, so human nature is an amazing thing, is a great thing. It's a very fun thing to look at. My point that I'm trying to get to is that style matters. So when I go back to the example of, I have a colleague, we both have the exact same goal. We are trying to come up with a process improvement that is very much needed in the organization that we work with. And our styles could not be more different. And it has been the most painful thing I have worked on. I have dreaded going into the meetings. I have dreaded sitting down with this individual who I like, is a perfectly fine individual. But our work styles could not be more different. And therein lies conflict. I want to come up with the process improvement, list the 5 steps, sit down with all the stakeholders and say, here's the 5 steps. he would like to look at every piece of history and research data for 6 weeks and explore all of the options, and then come up with very, very detailed. I think at last count he had over 100 lines of business requirements for this team, who we've not even talked to implement. Right? He wants to kind of come up with the full end-to-end solution, and I want to say, okay, at a high level, here are the 5 things that need to change. Here's how it needs to happen. And we just have very different styles, and it leads to conflict. But we have the same goal.
Not that we should totally hone in and crystallize an example, day-to-day thing, but what I hear when I hear that kind of situation is back to the different motivations. Like, well, why is someone doing that? I think about how I used to create software, and I think I wanted to control everything. Like, somehow every ounce of my intelligence and will is coming out in code form and in user interface form and in all that. And it has to be perfect. And
there's that word. We'll come back to that word.
And also through that, I mean, I had a lot of desire to control this output, And I'm at a different place now. I feel that, like any control, comes from the sort of constant presence with all of the change in variables and making sure that I'm conversing with everyone and the thing I'm making to improve my perspective and connectedness with what's going on, right? But I remember those days where I would produce a lot of documentation and that kind of stuff. And it came from the desire to control. So if I ran into someone who was more like, hey, just try a thing, relax, buddy,
Right. And what I want to do is so his style is more prescriptive and my style is more collaborative.
Yeah.
And so I want to sit down with the team that we're trying to, process, improve, and collaborate more and have some kind of, I have very clear guidelines of what I want them to change, but I want to bring it in a more collaborative way than he does. And he and I are working through it. We are. It's just, it's a process.
So that's the thing too. Like, how did you say that? Like, you have things, you have like guidelines that you want to go for. To me, like, I label those as, and I don't mean this in a negative way, because we all have them is assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And so assumptions can be great.
They're assumptions, they're biases. I have a bias of how I want this to work. I absolutely do. And
so, but we have like our prior experience that, and our biases and culture and all that stuff. It leads to, and perhaps positive and negative experience, to have filters and baggage, maybe. Depending, not that you have it in this situation, but I'm also backing away a little bit from
the specific example.
Specific example, yeah.
And just to be clear, I have all sorts of filters and baggage. You don't grow up in this world without having filters and baggage. So if there's anybody listening who doesn't think they have filters, baggage, biases, mistaken beliefs, sorry to disappoint you. We all have them. It's what you do with it. And again, it goes back to the whole human nature, and, it's a great thing. So, I will just say, I think everyone should embrace their life experiences and their filters, their biases. Always strive to learn more and to learn more about yourself, but don't run from that stuff. Anyway, sorry. Side note.
I suppose that makes sense. If you embrace it and try to unbox and explore and create clarity around it, it becomes an understood asset as opposed to like a hidden effect.
Absolutely. And I think the other reason it's important, and it's germane to the conversation that we're having, is that when you have their own baggage, right? Knowing what that is helps you to be more personally accountable for when there is a conflict, right? Because I can tell you I've played a role in conflict on creative projects. I don't know why I'm pointing at you.
We've made a few things together.
And being able to understand, and again, I'll go back to my style. Let's talk just for a minute about some of the creative projects that we've worked on together, because I do think it's relevant, and there has been conflict, and we've lived through it, and it's yep. Again, I'm giving an example for my work life of working with somebody with a very different style, but you and I also have very different styles and very different intensity levels. And that comes through in projects. You can forego sleep for as long as you choose in order to work on your projects, or to work on our projects, or to work on any project that you have. I don't have that neuroses.
Sure, that's
there
fair.
You go.
No, that's reasonable. That's very, very, very reasonable.
So it has led to conflict in the past where, you're working on one timeline and I have a much more stretched out timeline.
Sure, exactly. You take that personal trait or quirk or what have you, but then you play it out over the course of months or a year or whatever, and it does lead to essentially a different sort of resource investment, right?
Very different resource investment.
And that can be that totally can lead to conflict, where it's like, well, hey, wait a minute, on project XYZ, I thought we would be together at this position, where it's like all my tasks I've brought to that position, but hey, where are you or whatnot, kind of thing. I mean,
absolutely.
And not like we've had that exact same conversation, but
yeah,
it's come up.
Yeah, and there are times when so here's kind of then how this conflict would play out. You would just do all the tasks, and then I would end up feeling bad.
I've done that. It's terrible, honestly. I mean, I feel like I don't think I would do that now. Yeah. And as you laugh and put yourself into a coughing fit,
Sorry.
Which is reasonable, but
yeah, I mean, so we've had that where, so then we've got a loop going where, you're pulling more of the weight, I'm feeling bad, but our timelines still aren't aligned, and our intensity levels for the project are in different places. And so
we do have a recent project that's like super duper close to coming out.
Yay!
And I think one way we're, this is definitely going back and forth between, high level to on the ground stuff.
Oh, okay.
So we may be, but like I think it's relevant. I'm the one bringing it up, and I think it's very relevant to point out. This stuff doesn't have to stay the exact same way. You can change your relationship to a problem over time.
Absolutely.
By having the observations and noticing just you and how you're dealing with that conflict, and adjusting your approach over time to try new ways. And so for me, with this project, which is a video game that we designed together, right? But you came up with the core design, here's the essence of what this game is, and why it would be beneficial to that given audience and whatnot. And that served as an incredible point of reference and ongoing conversation, where we found roles in that project that were compatible with our
absolutely
different levels of investment.
Yes, and I think that project we have done a much better job in our collaboration on than some of our previous projects.
Yeah,
and I think that's part of the reason is I think we did have more conversations about roles and about what's your expectation for what you need from me, what then is the timeline that I need in order to get that done. Like, yep, I absolutely want to participate in that, but I'm going to need 2 weeks, whereas you might have wanted it done in 2 days. And so I think we had some more of those conversations, and I would say my goal is to get, X number of these done for you, this weekend, and
levels and whatnot.
Yeah.
Too. I'm trying to point out, I'm trying to practice getting better at hitting specifics. So I'm not just
cool.
talking over you. I can have a tendency to get a little hand wavy. So related to that, we're talking about something that helped how we evolved our collaborative approach and whatnot. And we'll go into some more thoughts on those kinds of strategies in soon. But taking a step back, the sort of it's almost like, well, what was present, or what if it were absent? Like I'm guessing, like, we're able to do that. This I don't know. I've got disclaimer urges. It's not just a yay high five our marriage podcast, right? But like, there are situations where people aren't able to evolve that for some reason or another, right? I'm guessing one of those big elements is like trust, right? Because we've had projects where, we've put on hold or what have you.
Absolutely.
And like, so like some people could take you, like whatever you take from those prior conflicts can make it hard to resolve the future, the conflicts that come later, especially with that given collaborator.
Right. Absolutely. And I think a couple of things can help with that, because you're right. We have the benefit of having, we live together, we share all sorts of things in life. We've been together for 1,000 years, so those are things that make some of this easier for us. We both over communicate, and so that also helps us in this regard.
Notice that weirds other people out.
Yes. Yes, when you, if I'm at work and I want to talk to somebody about how they're feeling, about a certain project, it can, my line of questioning about their feelings and how's it really going for you, and is there something you'd like to change? It can weird people out, or just even collaborating even with friends is very different. So I think a couple of things though that you can do to kind of help with those situations. One we kind of talked about a little bit, and that is understanding your style, understanding your baggage, understanding yourself, and owning it, and owning those things. If you know you are a very driven person who has intensity and short, tight timelines and very, very high expectations of other people, then just know that about yourself and own that. If you're somebody who...
That does help. I feel like I'm getting a little better with that.
You absolutely are, and it comes from practice, right? So what has helped you with that? It comes from practice and collaborating with more people and understanding what it takes, right? So what does it take to have a successful collaboration? You have to understand those things about yourself, and then you have to understand kind of the people that you're working with, that not everybody is going to match you one for one, that not everybody's going to kind of be exactly the same.
And not only, here's where I think it becomes this more attractive technique, where it's like, well, what are you telling me? I have to just tolerate how people are different and they're not able to just like buckle down and do the thing that they agreed to, gosh darn it, or whatever. It can actually lead to better stuff because they're inherently bringing a different perspective than what you have. And through that different perspective, you look at it through like science, in a way, they're bringing a different test to your hypothesis.
Yep.
And that inherently can lead to greater understanding and perhaps improve. I'm trying to get more specific than hand wavy. Other than what I can say is like literally that actually could be better from a scientific perspective.
I think that's brilliant. I think that's beautiful, because you're right. And if you think about kind of some of the most innovative things that people have come up with have kind of come out of those situations, right? Where you've got somebody who comes in the room who has a very different perspective, a different kind of view on it. And I think that's it's in our best interest to kind of to stop and pause and explore that a bit to see where it goes. I had another point I was going to make, and I'm losing it. Fell out of my brain.
Does it have to do with? I mean, inherently, we're talking about.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, please.
Sorry. The other thing that I think is a good skill for people to practice is getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
That doesn't make any sense.
I know, right?
Like, here comes I don't know, whatever, devil's advocate. So how is that even possible? You just said some kind of Zen thing at me, fortune cookie. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. That,
right.
Like, what am I supposed to do? Sit on a tack?
Practice being uncomfortable. So practice when you're collaborating, sharing kind of where you're at with things, sharing your feelings, or and it doesn't always have to be this like super emotional, like I'm feeling sad today because we're behind 3 days. But practice saying the things that are truly in your heart and in your mind and in your soul about your collaborative process, about your project, about where you're at. I really, really dislike the designs you brought to the meeting, and I'm trying to figure out why. They just are not working for me, and I'm not even sure why, but I just have had this reaction to them.
That's kind of an amazing example, because I mean, if you just stopped before you said because there are designers who would flip a table. I'd be like, and they'd hulk out, and or not, no offense, design, whatever. I'm a designer, so I can talk about my people. So that, if you think about it from a critique standpoint, as far as like making finding ways to respectfully give feedback or whatever. What's interesting is you've all of a sudden found a way to own that negative thing.
Well,
which makes it, I don't know, it makes it more palatable, doesn't it?
And it can, and that's something. And I guess, yeah, my example might have been a little bit flippant, because I wasn't thinking of like going in to give somebody negative feedback about some work that they've done, and that's how it came out. But it's more about if we're in the process together and we've got a conflict, and to just be vulnerable, open, honest as to kind of where you're at with things. What is a challenge for you in this conflict? For the fact that you completed my part of the work on the designs makes me feel really bad, because I really wanted to do it and I wasn't able to have the time to do it. And instead of us kind of rediscussing the timeline, you just went ahead and did it. And then you probably would have said, but I was trying to be helpful, and, the spirit's in the right place. But
what you do is you get to see how it is affecting someone else.
Yeah.
And if you are collaborating, that's part of the point, is to...
Yeah. And as we've talked about in kind of other work that we've done and in other talks that we've given, not every place is a safe place to do this, right? So not every environment, not every collaboration is a safe place to go and to be vulnerable. So you have to kind of, know where you're at too. So I'm not telling you to kind of go get smacked around or beat up mentally, emotionally, if you're in a situation where this kind of a conversation wouldn't be safe. And so one of the things I want to talk about is how do you kind of create those safe spaces. And for me, one of the things that I do is I kind of like own all my stuff, because it can be really disarming for people, and it can be really useful, in my work collaboration around process improvement. I've gone to this person and said, here's how I approach things, and here's the things that are not great about the way I approach this, right? Like, I know I'm going really fast. I know that I'm only coming up with half the idea. I don't have kind of all of the data to back up my ideas. I'm going off gut, and that's kind of how I work. But here's why, and here's where I'm at, and what do you think, and tell me about your process. And
that does, like, there's a whole bunch of things that were like what you're describing. It reminds me a bit of a book I read recently, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I bring it up almost every podcast, and it reminds me that what you're demonstrating is it's easy to just oversummarize. It's like, oh, I'm just trying to be real. I'm trying to be genuine or whatever. But it's more than that, because it's not just acknowledging like, oh, I've got a thing to say, frankly, or whatever. It's like, I'm saying a thing, but I want to. I'm relating to it, and I'm relating to you, whoever might be hearing this, because it may be frustrating or discordant or confusing, and like maybe this other context about me helps what I'm sharing make a little more sense, or opens you up to talking with me long enough until it does make sense.
Right. Well, and that's another great kind of zooming down into the kind of tip area is to check in with people, to say, is what I'm saying making sense, or do we need to talk about this more to get further clarity? You know, it sounds like a really simple thing, but that can help, because you're then opening up the opportunity for somebody to say, yeah, whatever, I get it. Which you can read that, or for somebody to say, no, I really get it. And you know what? I didn't know you were approaching it that way. Here's what I'm looking at.
Which a good continuum to help with that, like what you just described, is on one end is disengagement, and then the other end is engagement. It's like, no, really, I want to understand more about that, versus like, I would like to just pretend that didn't happen, or, you know.
Yeah. And you know what? Human nature again, coming at you. Sometimes it takes having these conversations multiple times before you can open that door to start unpacking the conflict and making a resolution to the conflict that is existing.
That is so. Kind of wrapping up the 10,000 feet up, because I know like it's like we're already getting there with tactics and whatnot. It's I think we've talked a lot about like, how do you notice the conflict, and what does it look like, what does it feel like, and that's getting pretty tangible. So let's switch to going on the ground, and let's talk about like some strategies as far as getting through this. Addressing it, like troubleshooting and that kind of stuff. So what would be some things that you think of if you're in a room, you're noticing that kind of disconnect. Like you mentioned, one of your techniques is to sort of like really own your stuff, your perspective. Let's continue along there. Like, what are some other things that you would do?
So I think owning your, where you're at with things and what you're bringing to the table, and particularly if you can identify your part in the conflict. Okay, so if you've got a conflict, if you can identify your part in the conflict, I'll go back to the simple example we were using before of you and I collaborating. And what I needed to own in that case is, I haven't been getting my work done. I haven't been getting my stuff completed. I haven't had any productive time on this in the last 2.5 weeks, or in the last 2 months, or, kind of whatever. But, kind of giving it, the measurable and the concrete as you, kind of are doing, just is good communication, right? To speak more specifically. And then
by you doing that, it actually, it's modeling a thing that because of my desire to have a successful collaboration with you, I may want to return that as well. Like, wow, this sounds kind of insightful. Like, you have pieces of this that, like, well, what am I doing in this in this situation? What's it causing? And I might start to explore and for instance, think, well, by working, by just plowing forward with these tasks, it might look like I don't trust you, right? And because, like, sure, you had a commitment, and I kind of, not kind of, I overrode it. I just steamrolled past it or whatever, right? I mean, so like that could probably help the conversation.
Yeah.
One person being vulnerable, other person reciprocating.
Yeah. And that's typically what happens, right? So if I can do something that is taking ownership of my part in it, it can be very disarming in a conflict, and open up the opportunity for you to say, oh gosh, here's the role I played in that conflict, and it's. Even in my professional life, I find it's almost, I jokingly say at work sometimes, it's almost like magic, because the second I own something, everyone else in the room is quick to then own their part of it. Like, and I don't mean own the project, but like own my part in why something didn't go well. Then everybody is just wanting to kind of get in, well, I should have done this, or, oh, geez, I didn't get this, and I knew I owed you that. And it's really, it's disarming, and it opens up that conversation.
It reframes the whole thing, though. Like, so if it is negative, and where it's like, oh, we didn't finish our thing, or we finished a thing and it's broken, or whatever, right? All of a sudden, the situation goes from, let's all like dispense blame and as in poison form, and we will all ingest this horrible feeling and feel terrible. Versus what you're describing is almost like we have a new circumstance. Let's face it and let's fix it together and whatnot. It's just a way different feeling.
Well, and so other things that you can do is that being solution focused, right? Hey, as neutrally as you possibly can. Hey, everybody on the team, we've got kind of a conflict. We seem to be stalling out. Not getting, our code base done, not getting, whatever that situation is.
Well, yeah, your pages per day. Like we need to, why is this so low? Because we've got a date, we've got a publishing agreement, we've got whatever, right?
Yeah, and so kind of taking that and having that kind of shared information or shared goal kind of laid out there.
What
I
about
lost that train of thought?
No, there's so many interesting trains of thought. Now, let's say you're in that circumstance where you're doing that, you're laying the foundation. 10 people are in the room, 5, whatever. But let's say like, one of them is
this guy?
Is on a different is like the you blew my mind. It's time for me to freak out and or whatever person, where it's like they have gone to some other extreme where it's like the counter, right? So like you're describing like, okay, so it can get all positive where people are like, I'm contributing, and this is my thing, and I'm owning my thing, and all of a sudden you have this group of people that are becoming part of a shared purpose and doing amazing stuff, and that's really fun. But like sometimes it doesn't go like that, and it's like there's a chain of freakouts or whatever.
Yeah. And this goes back to my Zen cone that I said earlier of get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because one of the strategies you can do, and this is going to sound hand wavy, I think is the word you used earlier, but just holding the emotion in the room. And what I mean by that is allowing everybody's kind of different stuff to just be there in the room, or on the call, or in the, in your space, without needing to change it. Right? So you've got, Susie in the corner swirling around, freaking out. You've got, Bobby in the other corner going, that's right, you guys all screwed this up, right? Because we've all been taking our ownership, right? And Bobby's the key, linchpin to what the real problem is, but, he's going, that's right, you're all messing it up. Just letting that sit there and not having to change it or and this is really, really, really hard. In your head, like those three people that are being quiet all had a role to play and they're not owning it. And so now I really want to make my list for those three people and say, hey, Susie and Bobby and Jimmy, since you didn't speak up here, let me just tell you the things that you did wrong on this project. That, you can't go there, to just kind of let it be. And these kinds of conversations and these kinds of conflicts aren't always resolved like immediately in one session or in one time or in one conversation, right? These are things that we work through in projects. These are things that we work on over the life cycle of a project. It's why we try to do lessons learned and these kinds of things at the end. But this is more that kind of ongoing is as you're in the process of it. So really just
so hold the emotion though, like. So in a way, like what you're describing is almost like, well, you reached into your, Kate toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, man, hold the emotion tool. What? Like, what does that look like for me to do that?
It looks like acceptance. And so it's, wow, I'm getting super zen now because it's doing nothing. Right? So what does it look like? It looks like doing nothing. And for anybody, so again, my background is in mental health and my background is as a trained therapist. And so anybody who's been to therapy or who's gone to therapy, there's that time in the room when, you're saying something and your therapist is responding to you, and then you say something else and you just, kind of lay it all out there, or you drop some big information and there's kind of no response. It's just there in the room with you, and it's okay that it's there in the room with you, and nobody needs to say anything or do anything with it. And so that's where some of that holding the emotion comes from. It's doing nothing in some cases. It's being comfortable in the silence.
Okay, so help me with that. So like, what if like these freakouts are making me want to freak out, but I'm like, nope, Kate. That sounds convincing. How do I do nothing here? Right? What do I do? Just like grit my teeth and hold and like clench my fists? Like what am I doing? How am I doing nothing to help in that situation?
Right. And I think typically it's and again I think of Finding the Space to Lead. Okay, so which is another book, a great resource or another great book, is Finding the Space to Lead, and it's about kind of creating space in those moments to build leadership skills, and so there's a lot of meditation, and so in those times, in those spaces, it's taking that deep breath and doing. It can be as simple as doing a body scan to say, how am I feeling sitting right here in this moment? Wow, I have a lot of tension in my shoulders, or my jaw's really tight, or gosh, I got a cramp in the bottom of my foot. But just kind of doing that check-in with yourself in that body scan. And then when you find those tension points, to take a deep breath and to breathe into that. And all of that is going to take you, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, where you're just allowing kind of what's happening in the room to just to be there.
Oh, okay. So like there's some way of absorbing that and or having it just flow through you, that you're not catching fire in all of that emotion.
And the concept of in Finding the Space to Lead is really about, by doing that, by taking that time to do, whether it's a body scan or if it's just some meditative breath where you're just focusing on breathing in and breathing out, for 15 deep breaths, that our minds, again, amazing ability to kind of synthesize and process information and think more creatively. So when you do that, you kind of get this natural tendency to disconnect from some of that fight and flight, right? Like, I got to think of my next rebuttal to what somebody is saying to me, right? If I feel like I'm under attack. And it's kind of stopping that and saying, okay, So now creatively, where can we go from a solution orientation? How can we come up with a solution? And there's, tons of research and tons of stories and tons of anecdotes on things of, companies going through these incredibly difficult situations and trying to decide, what do we do? And everybody saying, okay, you know what, we're going to take, a half an hour to go do some meditative walking, and then we'll all come back and we'll discuss kind of what our options are, and how we're going to be able to move forward. And just the difference that space can make in the decision making.
Which totally makes sense. I mean, it de-escalates the sort of the emotional intensity. It puts out that fire, so you don't feel like you're acting out of like, I'm on fire. I'm going to be reacting and not necessarily soaking in any more information because I'm too busy being on fire and all that. It's like the example, the intense example you mentioned is, what was the author's name? Because I
Janice, I'm going to say her name wrong. Maturo
or something like that.
Yeah, I'm going to say it wrong.
Right.
But Rob will put it in the show notes.
Yes, I will. What she was talking about? Let's be friendly to our business inclined folk, including us as independent creative, and also, if we're day jobbing at night, gigging, whatever the heck we're doing. You know what? Business people are creative too. And she described a circumstance that I wouldn't typically describe as, oh yeah, that was a creative project. Look at, whatever, they're making a television show or a video game or whatever, or a comic. She was describing they had to make a judgment call to recall like a lot of food.
Yeah, there was a health recall.
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly where she was working at the time, but she was one of the executives, and it was one of those things where they could have gone either way. They thought in the panicked mode, they could have easily been more of your, thinking of like your typical, what did I read where like the most perfect villain is a business person nowadays, because
fantastic.
It is, because like you get to vilify how they're interested in doing something related to money over all else, and screw all the consequences because money, right? And the circumstance she described could have been dramatized, whatever, a little bit, but like it sounded like it could have gone that way. But by stepping back and sort of de-escalating the emotional portion of it, and you know what? I'm going to say like not all the emotion. I think the panic got de-escalated and the empathy increased.
Sure, absolutely.
Like they cared about people a lot more when they came back from their meditative walk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not just about being cold and all
detached. It's not about being detached. It's about allowing yourself to kind of see where you are, see what's driving that conflict for you, and making the best choice to move forward.
Empathy. What if you're in that situation, thinking about some more handy techniques?
Mm-hmm. Well, some additional. I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
Please.
No. Some additional techniques that I do think of, or that I use in, some of this stuff is you're going to have to lay some foundation and do some work on with your collaborative teams. So. Shared mission statements, shared guiding principles, these kinds of things can really be beneficial if they're if they're used in the right way. Anything like that can be. I work in an organization where we have something called 5 words, and these are the 5 words that we manage all of our business by, and they're they stay the same, which is nice. But one of the 5 words is candor, and so our organization values candor. And so they talk about the different ways to to engage, to use candor in your daily life. And we're ranked on it and our goals and all of these different things, which, there's several other kind of corporate words, if you will. But it's not uncommon to hear in a tense meeting, hey guys, in the spirit of candor, I just need to say that the solution we've come up with, and the fact that you need 9 months to solution for this is not going to work for my client, or is not going to work for my department, or whatever. And it is a way for us to have a shared vocabulary and a shared mission, right? So as an organization, we have a shared mission to speak candidly to each other, to engage in candor, and we value that. And so, and people use it really appropriately, which I find really interesting, because I've been in other situations where, you've got these corporate things and they're things that you use to throw at each other, right?
Super icky in some large organizations, as far as if that is used just as a disingenuous mechanism. But what you're describing sounds like almost like a preparing for the reality that there's going to be conflict.
Exactly. And I've kind of one other place where I want to connect it. So kind of having that shared mission or shared goal or shared tenets that you're going to work with each other by is important. I think of when you do design workshops. And so when you do a design workshop, you have ground rules you set at the beginning, right? And how is it that you're going to create a safe space for everyone to kind of throw all of their brainstorming and all of their ideas out? And you set that stage in the beginning of those meetings. And then you model that and you make sure that that space is safe to do that. And it's the same thing, right? It's just kind of two different levels of example, right? I've got this kind of corporate culture that's doing it, and then you've got kind of a 4-hour session where you're going to kind of do the same thing
with a very not corporate feel.
Right, absolutely.
Because in fact, it's a lot of my approach involves trying to make it safe for everyone to just set their, okay, you came here with a hat. Take it off, set it down, and now we're people. We're people making something together, and it's in a way it is addressing the same need that other mechanism you described, where it's like, we have these 5 words, and for me it's more like I have a safe collaborative culture that I want to say, like, every one of your perspectives is to be honored when you're here, and we're going to find ways to integrate our ideas. We're going to find ways to safely critique our ideas as well, and that is definitely going to get uncomfortable and unfamiliar.
Right.
But yet, it will be more tolerable and intriguing, with a little bit of a sense of play, a little bit of a sense of adventure. So I like to start things out with. So not everything I do is like all explicit and it's like, this is my theory, blah blah theory. It's no, we start out doodling, and I get adults doodling, and making it safe to like. To then doodle on each other's doodles. Exactly. It's fun, and but then through that, all of a sudden there's openness. Through the openness, it's like you're not coming into a situation with the closed roles and assumptions and the hierarchy that can try to enforce those roles and assumptions that could stop the creativity and the collaboration. Because inherently collaboration is like people connecting horizontally versus like, waiting for your boss to give you something. Right. That's commanding. That's not collaborating.
Yeah. And I would also say, so kind of going back to that, you set the stage, and you have tools that you use to help kind of disarm or create this safe collaborative space. When we just worked on this most recent game project, I feel like we did a lot more work around kind of setting the stage for how are we going to work together? What are, and some of it was expectation management, but it was even...
that's a big thing in and of itself.
It is. It is, and I feel like...
Worth like mentioning, that's a thing to check.
Yeah, expectation management is a thing to check, but I think that's also, Google conflict resolution, number one thing you're going to come up with is, okay, everybody needs to be on the same page about expectations. So
sure.
I don't mean to discount it, but we're going deeper. But I think that we were more intentional about not just our expectations for each other, but how are we going to talk about our expectations? And that's what I'm kind of talking about here as far as kind of this on the ground strategy, if you will, is have the conversation about how you're going to have conversations. Have the conversation about how you're going to communicate. Have the conversation about how are we going to manage when a conflict comes up. My organization, we're going to value candor. That's what we're going to do when conflicts come up. We're going to value candor. In your workshops, how are you going to value everyone's opinion? What are we going to do when conflicts come up? Well, I want you all to know you're on a level playing field. Everybody's the same in here,
Yet there is accountability, but it's not through the hierarchy; it's through the feedback.
Yeah,
and that is it's a subtle but very very significant distinction.
Yeah.
Well,
and just to kind of, I didn't want to discount your expectation comment. It's kind of like I did, but
it is a default, right?
When conflicts arise, it's typically, I think most of the research will show there's like 8 reasons that conflict typically arrives in a collaboration. And I don't have all 8 of them here, but it's because, it's again, the conflicting styles, the conflicting goals, conflicting resources, conflicting perspective, right? So we've got different perspectives. That's, I think, a big one that happens is, again, people come to it with their own view of the world and how things should work. And, I think it should be 3 panels and you think it should be 6. We've got so much screen real estate we're working on. And I wrote, 80 words for this one page, and you wanted, a quick 10 words so we could do some cool design, all these kinds of differing perspective, differing resources, right? So back to the earlier example, I didn't have the time resource that you grant yourself because you don't need sleep.
That's changing over time.
It is. It is. I know. I like to give you a hard time.
And Jersey likes that. Here you go, Jersey.
Yay. My work here is done.
Exactly. End podcast. No, I think we'll end a little more gracefully than that.
Excuse me. I hope so. So yeah, I think those are some of the key things around how do you deal and work with conflict. And none of the tips that I feel like I've given or talked about thus far in our conversation are quick hit, simple things. I am not telling you if you say these 7 things or if you, go to every meeting wearing a baseball cap, then, it's going to go much better for you. These are things that need to be practiced. You had mentioned earlier, Rob, trust, right? So trust has to be built with the folks that you're collaborating with in order to be able to kind of work through some of these conflict pieces.
That sounds a lot harder than knowing if I just said 5 buzzwords and dropped a mic.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Let's see. So.
Well, I can come up with 5 buzzwords that we could try. We do like a little scientific study.
Write
Everybody
a book,
try this.
Start a speaking tour.
No, I just, I think and what, Lean Into Art is about and what we're talking about is really just our experience, right? And what we think. And
oh, yeah, absolutely. We're sharing things that relate to our prior experience and our path. Like what have we been doing and finding valuable as we practice and try to get better at conflict, because I mean as a topic when it comes to making things and I mean offering services professionally, it is I would say it's a very important topic and a skill that is pretty darn universal. So it's but your connection to it could be different. You will have inherently different strengths and tolerances for different parts of or different techniques that would be helpful. Like holding the emotion in the room might be your thing, might not be. You might want to find a way to just cope with it until you can, get into your strength, which might be helping one person feel super heard. right?
And I want to let's talk about helping people feel heard, but I just have to say I work with a very dear friend who I adore, but she cannot handle silences in meetings. And so as the conflict kind of goes up and the silences get more punctuated, she gets more and more nervous and is constantly filling that space with anything she can come up with. And, in her and I've had that conversation. I'm like, you just have to sit quietly. It's going to be okay. And she's like, I can't stand that you're okay with this. And, and we kind of go back and forth because she has a very difficult job and she does get into kind of a lot of high conflict conversations. And so, it's one of those areas where I've been coaching her a little bit to just let the silence be. I promise no one will get hurt.
Okay. So, let's say I'm sold, letting the silence be. Like, well, why? What helps with those kind of pauses?
I think it allows people to feel able to take the time to think. When we're constantly filling all of the time and all of the space with words, it makes it more difficult to think, and you get into reactionary mode where I've got to have a comeback or rebuttal. Whereas if it's okay for there to be a space in there, if there's okay for there to be an uncomfortable silence, and in some cases, the uncomfortable silences can hold people accountable as well. Because if you've got somebody who's not kind of being accountable to their...
Like, what if that person you mentioned in the beginning said, I just hate this work, and that's it. And then everyone just sits there. Without them owning it. Because your earlier example had that person saying, like, well, because I feel in this way, and I'm trying to figure it out, and all of a sudden it's inviting everyone in to help them figure out that circumstance. But a good case for a nice pause would be if someone just drops that and then makes them accountable.
And I think it makes them accountable, and I feel like, and I don't know, I could be living in my own little rainbow and sunshine land. It makes them accountable in a little bit more gentle way, where I'm not going to, I'm not pointing anything out to you. I'm just going to let that silence sit there. And oftentimes, and not always, right? Because some people are just going to go, and that's going to be it. They're going to, stand
Sure.
off with you, right?
Well, it's like that. There are ways to react in a aggressively, in an aggressive manner that is nonverbal or verbal, right?
But
if you metaphorically tase the designer with like, I hate the design, and the designer's like, you were dumb because you don't understand fonts and kerning and whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to not make a font joke right now. I'm trying to not make a font joke.
I know. I like to pick on font jokes.
But so what I find is that oftentimes when you leave that space and you leave that silence there, the person who's maybe kind of dropped their, I don't like that, there's a silence, so they're going to be able to, again, think, have the space to say, I don't like it because of this. Or I think what I don't like is this. Oftentimes that's what you'll find is if you give the space, you're going to get more information. And that second round of information is oftentimes in an emotional situation is going to be more useful, is going to be more insightful. And again, these are, tips and tricks from the, land of psychology, but, you just let that be there. People feel like they want to explain if there's that space in there. And you had mentioned earlier, and I think another thing that's important in conflict is really helping people to feel heard. And to honestly, I mean, it's again, Google conflict resolution, and right next to managing expectations is going to be active listening, right? So really making sure that we are listening to each other. And
it sounds like to me you're saying that we should be listening to each other.
Very well done. Very well done. Very well done. Active listening joke. But yeah, so that kind of practice that they, made you do in high school, where repeat back what you heard them say,
Mm.
as you just demonstrated.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there is a time and place for that, because you've done it a couple times in the podcast. What I hear you saying is this, and it helps to make sure that your perspective matches what my perspective is. And again, if you look at conflict, oftentimes perspective is one of the keys.
I've worked with people a long time ago. They have a habit. They clearly took a seminar, and they would basically repeat the last 3 to 5 words I said.
5 words you said.
Exactly. Yes. And that's not active listening, I would say. Because where normally when I do it not in a jokey manner, it's to somehow soak in what you said and see if I'm understanding where it's not going to come out exactly like you said it.
Right. And it shouldn't, right? Because what I want to hear is your perspective on it. I don't want to parrot. I don't want someone to just,
Sure.
squawk back to me my words. I want to hear what you think I'm saying, so I can agree or disagree.
I think we've covered a lot of tips and techniques. We've covered a lot of good exploration of conflict. Clownflict? I don't know what that is, but it's the most poisonous form of conflict,
Right?
I think, probably.
Clownflict.
Yeah. Not touching it. So, what would be a good way to close this off as we think about
We could get in a big conflict.
Let's demonstrate a conflict. No, we shouldn't.
Yes, let's do it.
I'm not listening. No,
All right, that failed.
I don't think it's working. No, so I think we covered a lot of good techniques. Is there anything else that you wanted to explore on this? We have mentioned a few resources that might be interesting. We did mention the book, Finding the Space to Lead.
Mm-hmm.
We also mentioned Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And we mentioned biases earlier. So I think the book that it's been at least a few podcasts since I mentioned it, You Are Now Less Dumb by David McRaney. Awesome book to explore your biases. Daring Greatly, really awesome to explore the kind of if you would like to get deeper into this overall topic and why is this team not jiving? What's not working here? That is a fantastic resource.
Yeah. All of her books are very good for that type of work.
Cool.
I think Daring Greatly is probably the most one that's going to talk about teams and collaboration, but The Gifts of Imperfection and I'm blanking on the other one, but are also fantastic books for, similar.
That's okay. Super cool. And we did mention so Finding the Space to Lead is definitely it's like a part of that whole, that mindfulness movement, and putting it in context of business and collaboration, making things with others, and what happens when you are exploring that from a place of high intentionality and consideration.
Yep.
So, what do you think? Any other resources that you would have to recommend?
No.
Cool.
Be curious. Be curious about people, and be curious about how they work. I think that's the other resource, and you have that all within you.
That's awesome. Well, okay. I think that wraps up our topic then. Super cool. I thank you, Kate, for taking part in this and co-hosting with me. And this is a lot of fun. Jerzy, tell us what you think about this.
Thanks, Rob. It's fun to come on and hang out with the Lean Into Art podcast. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to kind of sit in from time to time. it's been a lot of fun.
Super cool. And thank you for those of you who have tuned in this evening and are hearing it live. And thank you for those of you who are downloading this. You're awesome. We appreciate you doing that and taking the time to listen. And if you have found things of use in this, tidbits and exciting elements, and you're not subscribed, by all means, go subscribe to this podcast feed. Go to leanintoart.com. Or you can find us in iTunes. To share sort of like kudos and help this podcast get more discovered, one great thing to do is to go give us a star rating on iTunes. And if you're beyond that, go check out our workshops page on Lean Into Art. There's some there are some pay what you want resources out there. Great things like Jerzy has an excellent workshop called FATAM, which is all about comic lettering and sound design and whatnot. Super good resource that I do hear mentioned now and then. Hi, Owen. Heard they mention that on your podcast. Owen Jollins of the I forget his new podcast name, but go check him out on look for. I'll put him in the show notes. And thank you for those of you who have done that, bought the workshops, and given us the ratings and stuff. You can always thumbs up this video on YouTube. And of course, if you want more of this kind of content, we do this podcast every other week, the Lean Into Artcast, where we tackle a big topic and explore it and whatnot. But then we also have Extra Lean, where that's the informal, cheeky. We just unbox whatever we feel like unboxing at the time, and let what's on our mind with the stuff that we're making right now. And that is on our Patreon page, which is at patreon.com/leanintoart, where, of course, you can become a supporter of us there as well. Thank you to all of our current supporters. You rock. And you can always find show notes at leanintoart.com. So, until next time, I have been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter, and
I've been Kate Shields Stenzinger at Kate Stenzinger on Twitter.
Awesome. As Jerzy would say, okay, bye. And this is where the music would come in and stuff like that. But I will do that in post for those who are downloading this on the RSS feed. And super cool. Those of you who are in the chat room, thank you very much for being here. And I'm trying to look around and see if there's any questions. I will go back to the feeds and stuff and say hi, thank you, and answer stuff there. I'll check the YouTube page and, of course, the this event page on Google+. And if there's anything on Twitter, too, as well. And go there and respond right after this recording. So thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody.